everyone, and welcome to Beauty from the Shelf, a podcast where industry experts fill in the gaps that are integral to growth for early-stage beauty founders and brands. One place that business folks often go to when looking to develop a new brand or new product is to follow the consumer. And today's guest speaker does exactly that every day. I got a chance to sit down and speak with Wendy Liebmann, the CEO and Chief Shopper at WSL Strategic Retail. WSL Strategic Retail is a retail strategy and shopping futures company who focuses every day, hour, and minute ensuring their clients are shopper-centric in all of the strategies they develop for the future. They do this with research and insights with a clear focus on the shopper.
Prestige versus mass, luxury versus masstige. I mean, it's all in our heads, right? It's not the way the shopper thinks at all.
That's just a snippet of the conversation that I had with Wendy today. And today's conversation was one of those strategic talks where you get to really peek into the mind of someone who is so well versed in this industry that it helps you to understand how you can look at frameworks as you look at building brands or building out new products and just increasing your own personal toolbox so that you can be a more strategic thinker. I absolutely loved some of the nuggets that we got from Wendy today, and I'm so excited for you to hear it. So want to jump right into today's discussion. As you know, this podcast is really focused on early stage beauty brands that are looking to scale their business at retail, omni-channel retail. And so I think there's so much going on in the landscape of prestige beauty and mass beauty, and would love for you to just start off the conversation being someone who knows the shopper well and talking about why you think prestige beauty is partnering with mass players. I'm thinking of Kohl's and Sephora. I'm thinking of even a 13 Lune and JCPenney or Ulta and Target. There's so many of these that are popping up. Why do you think that's happening? Are there benefits to the consumer? Just would love your thoughts on that.
Being purely biased about follow the shopper to see the future, on a positive note, I would be saying, you know what? These prestige brands have finally realized that just because they have a more luxury price point, perhaps, that doesn't mean that people who have lower household incomes are not interested in these brands. You and I know really, really well that if you are passionate about your hair, your lips, your shoes, whatever, maybe you can't afford pick a fancy car, but you put your money away for the things that are really important to you. So being somewhat biased, I would say finally the light bulb went on and a lot of these companies said, let us go where the shopper is and not just be so exclusive that we don't go there and say, you come find us. However, on the other side, I think that we're also seeing, particularly if it's specialty retailers like a Sephora or an Ulta, how do they grow? They can only open so many physical stores, even today when you can get good deals on rent. So they are looking for ways to expand and to a partner to expand their access to shoppers. So I think you've got two things. One is a recognition that lower income doesn't mean I won't pay a premium for my beauty. And also, how many stores can I put? Let me put my stores within places where my shopper might already be. So I think there's a lot of that going on at the moment.
I love one of the things that you said, Wendy, which was go where the shopper is. And I think as someone who is a chief shopper, right, very well how if you are really going where the shopper is, or that being the consumer, that can unlock so many things for you. I'm going a bit off script here, but wondering if there are things that you've learned from going or being where the shopper is that have helped kind of brands as they are looking to launch or partner at retail. And if you could share some of those things.
I do think that strategy has really evolved, especially in the last couple of years, with the ways you can have access to your consumer as shopper, which you couldn't have a decade ago. So in some ways, we've always had to follow the shopper to the store, right? And so either I had to have my own store or I had to go to somebody else's store and I had to say, please, sir, please, ma'am, could I sell on your shelves? So that was a harder slog, but it was certainly, if you understood that shopper, that consumer as shopper, then you could tell that story to a retailer. I'm going to tell you a quick story along that front. I remember with one of the Walmart senior executives a number of years ago, and we were having the whole conversation around professional hair care. And he said to me at the time, that those products are great, but they're just too expensive for our shoppers. Our shoppers can't afford to pay whatever the price was then, premium for specialty hair care. And I said, you're making a big mistake, because actually I challenged that and I took him out of the store. I was lucky. There was a woman in the aisle walking back and forth in the hair care aisle, and she didn't do anything, looked back and forth and walked out, had other shopping done, checked out, walked out of the store. And I knew there was a Sally's beauty salon next door. It was, sort of good luck. But I said to him, let's just follow her, shall we? And of course, by good chance and smart insight, she walked out of the store with her Walmart shopping bags and walked into Sally's. And, in the day it was Paul Mitchell or whatever it was, bought this and she was, she was there not too long. She came out and I said to her, hi, I just saw you at Walmart. She said, yes. And I said, that's interesting. What did you buy here? And she said, oh, I bought Paul Mitchell something. And I said to her, how come you didn't buy that at Walmart? She said, well, they don't carry it. I don't know why they don't carry it. I mean, this is my product. And fortunately, the store was next door. So I said to him, follow the shopper to see the opportunity. So I do think if you really understand who the individual consumer is and what their passions are, then you don't presume that, oh, they couldn't afford this. They'd never pay for this. And in fact, you can see real opportunity when you add in categories, brands that otherwise you may not carry.
That's such a great insight. And I think so many brands, when I hear them, they have their kind of star retailers at the top of the list. I think we both kind of know some of the ones that are at the top of the list quite frequently. We forget that, when you look at market share, there's still a good number of shoppers, like half of the country, right, that are at Walmart, probably daily, weekly. We know a lot of folks are customers at Amazon and all of these other retailers. So I think that's a really great note to kind of follow the shopper and understand, if they're not being spoken to already, that's an opportunity.
Yeah. And I do think it's really understanding, and it's really sort of having a broader, as you know with us, more of a lifestyle view of understanding what people's preferences are, priorities are. If they love to be fit and healthy, then they'll probably pay a premium for whether it's food or beverage or yoga gear or sneakers or whatever. They may, cut back on lots of other things. But if you understand their passion point, then you have a really good chance of bringing that to them or addressing that with product categories. So if you're an up-and-coming brand or a new brand, that becomes a real opportunity, first of all, to go into a retailer and say, yoo-hoo, you're missing this, and here's why, but also to satisfy a need of a shopper in those stores.
That's really good. So I know I kind of got off track, but that was just such a good nugget that I was like, I want to ask another question.
Yes, absolutely. That's a good interview. You listen to the answer and you find another question, right? Yeah, exactly.
That's the goal. But going back to kind of thinking about, prestige beauty players, the consumer they're going where you said the consumer is, so they're realizing the consumer is at these mass retailers, as we just kind of shared. Do you think that it is sustainable for these prestige retailers to partner with the mass retailers? Is prestige going to be kind of non-existent? You did talk about it kind of driving growth as you talked about opportunity for distribution, but, is that something that you would think is a watch out or something to look out for?
It is a challenge. Think about, I'm actually often loath to talk about price point because I think it's prestige versus mass, luxury versus masstige. I mean, it's all in our heads, right? It's not the way the shopper thinks at all. So I think in some ways, that gets us down this sort of weird company, corporate way of segmenting our businesses. But that said, I do think there's an issue. If you are a premium priced product, one of the things around premium pricing, especially if you're in a more luxury category, whether it's handbags or skincare, means that it's a bit more exclusive. It's not available everywhere. It's intentionally something that not everybody may have access to. You may lust after it and save for it. That's all great. So I do think part of the cachet of these specialty-oriented brands in whatever category is that level of exclusivity. So all of a sudden you see you call it prestige, I'll call it luxury brand in a retailer, and you're like, did that fall off the back of a truck? Is it real? Is it legit? I mean, it's the Amazon conversation, right? Is this real? How old is this? Who bought it? Who sold it? All of those. But that whole piece is so much of that luxury is partly exclusivity. The other part is the environment. And so if I'm now starting to bring more premium priced products into a more mass retail environment, am I bringing with it some sense of specialty, exclusivity, the way it's merchandised? Am I creating some unique products in that space that let me still have my aspirational, maybe higher price point somewhere else? I do think there's a real brand issue of thinking about what premium price really means, and is it still aspirational, or again, does it feel like it fell off the back of a truck?
That's so interesting. And I mean, I know as someone who's an avid shopper, likely will be, till the day I die, that's one of the things that you like about luxury brands, the fact that it is aspirational. You know that if this is an Hermes bag or a Chanel, you saved a couple of pretty coins, to be able to purchase that.
Right.
And there's a level of exclusivity there.
Right.
And that does kind of go away or lessen if you expand your offerings. I'm curious, you kind of talked a little bit about brands kind of having to think about what that means for them. What do you think the benefits are to brands that might want to go after a luxury price point or go after kind of prestige, luxury, whatever, we want to call it? Are there still benefits given the context of today's shopper?
I think there are. I absolutely do. And I think one of the challenges that we've been facing is that luxury distribution, aka department stores, has been so challenged that it is really difficult often to have, if I've got a really premium priced brand that requires, service and explanation and presentation in a premium way, where do I go now? I mean, of course, the department stores still exist. You've got, the Saks of the world, the Nordstroms, the Macy's, whatever. But the traffic in those stores, the issues around, much of how they sell and what they sell and who comes to buy, have been challenged over these last 4 or 5 years. So if I'm a premium priced brand, particularly in beauty, the question is, do I need to be there because it sets the bar, it sets the tone of who I am? Can I then find other relevant distribution, whether it's sort of more direct or with other unusual, surprising partners, white space, opportunities, to then at least, execute and get my volume without losing my reputation? As I alluded to before, I think the opportunities now with being able to sell, direct to consumer or through live streaming or through, some of the interesting new social, well, not so new anymore, but, Pinterest, Instagram, whatever, do give you an ability to create, the brand voice in a special way. But I think it is a greater challenge. But I do think that if you've got a unique product with unique ingredients and unique story that's really relevant to shoppers, particularly in the beauty category, there are opportunities for you to establish a more premium price point.
Thank you. So we started off the conversation talking a lot about luxury and prestige and touched a little bit on mass. I think that some that might be listening to this conversation might be familiar with the term masstige, right? Which is the blurring, if you will, of prestige and mass because you are seeing more connectivity with brands that are showing up in these prestige places and in the mass places. What do you think the blur means for brands? Is this more opportunity for them? Does this mean they can be everything to everyone? Is it more opportunity for distribution? Would love your thoughts on that.
Again, I think mastige is all in the brain of we companies. I think one of the things that Ulta did very well, but granted, it's taken them 30 years to do it. So longevity gives me a lens to that, because I remember when they started, they understood, or their strategy was to create this, beauty environment where you could get all price points from, more popular price to more premium price. You could get your hair done, all of those things. It took a very long time, not to convince the consumer to come shop there, but to convince the brands to go there. And so I think the issue has not really been in the minds of the consumer as a shopper. Ask any shopper, ask any consumer before they go shopping or after they go shopping to open their makeup bag, right? We all know what we've got in there, right? I've got my L'Oreal foundation, I've got my MAC lipstick, I've got my Trish McAvoy brightening under eye thing, which costs more than anything else in the world, all of those things. So this is something where I think brands have to, again, I'm beating a dead horse, understand where their shoppers are willing to go, and more importantly, what they're willing to spend their money on, and then pick the right environment to do that. Now, today, in some ways, it's actually easier, only because there are more places I can do that, an Ulta, a Sephora, Blue Mercury, add some of the others into the pot. And of course, digital, right? Online. Amazon, like it or not, So I think the opportunities to me are much more extensive now, but you sort of got to get out of pricing, I'll price for a department store distribution or I'll price for a drugstore distribution. Rather, it is, where's the gap in the marketplace? Who is the person I'm really trying to serve and fill that gap for them in terms of product and benefits, needs, solutions? What's the right price for that? And okay, now where do I go to sell it? And whether that's directly through me, and I set up my own distribution, or I find the right partners to sell through. But I think if you now today put the consumer in the center and then think about how they shop, that's where you define the opportunities. Little brand, big brand, old brand, new brand. That's the way to look at things today.
So interesting. I love that. And interesting to say that Ulta was, a bit visionary, if you will, by seeing that there was benefit and having all of these beauty brands being housed under one roof and the services, to your point. They're definitely, I think, reaping those benefits now. Yeah.
It's taken a long time. You have to be very arduous. You have to be, passionate about the belief and know that, you've heard me say, if you follow the shopper to see the future, you will. But boy, 30 years in the making, I suppose 15 years in, people started to get it, right?
Yeah, eventually, right? So one of the things that I love about you and the work that your company does is that you are a global shopper.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, you're able to not just follow US shoppers, but what's happening around other markets. Are there trends or things that you're seeing from those shoppers that you're excited about? If so, what are those things? And, what are some of the things that you might be seeing that you think, are on the brim of coming to the US, or things that you'd love to see us do more of over here?
Well, I think, that's an open door that I love to have. Thank you. Let me walk right in. I really think this convergence of health and beauty is massive around the world. We've been talking about it for a long time here. Looking good is feeling good, all of those things. Some of the things we're seeing around the world are really quite extraordinary. I mean, we were in and it's either ourselves or our scouts around the world, in the new Rituals flagship store in Amsterdam. And Rituals is a brand that actually was founded by a former Unilever executive some years ago. A lot of, body care, fragrance, all of those kinds of things. And they opened this flagship, 4 stories, in Amsterdam recently. And the thing that's amazing to me, I mean, you walk in, first of all, it's a very sensorial experience. You know, it's very green, it's very fragrant. On the ground floor, there's a lot of, you know, more traditional fragrances, body products, etc. But up on the, I can't remember now if it's the third or fourth floor, it's appropriate that I said I can't remember. I mean, they have a whole department that's all about brain health. And, you know, you can go and put on a band that helps measure how your brain is doing, what activity would be good for your brain, what things would be good emotionally for you. They have quiet spaces, not just sort of the yoga space. It's all of these, it's this sort of evolution as you go up the store of everything from beauty as it's evolved to where it's evolving, which I think is really remarkable, that whole connection, you know, mind-body connection to internal, external. And then they have this wonderful restaurant on the way out, which of course you can sit and have a healthy cocktail. But that to me was really interesting to see they would have this sort of brain lab somewhere in the middle of this beauty experience, which I think is one. And some of these are flagships, but I see so many elements that could translate into, you know, more mass retail. In Australia, one of my favorite retailers is a retailer called Mecca. And Mecca is the Sephora equivalent in Australia and New Zealand. And they opened a flagship in the middle of the pandemic, no less. But one of the things they started to add into this beauty experience was fertility clinics, a naturopath. They already had a lot of this, you know, skincare services that you might expect. But they realized that women, particularly when they thought about health and beauty, particularly wellness at large, thought about these issues, even in, you know, a bells and whistles, fabulous red escalator, all of this sort of fabulous space. And what they've been able to do, which I think has been really important, is they have their small format, you know, sort of neighborhood, Main Street stores. And because of technology, they are able to, any of that advice, any of the events they create around topics with variety of people, you know, all get streamed to stores. So it's not just this precious flagship, but it's also built into the communities. But when they added fertility clinics, people were like, what? You know, and yet, again, the shopper got it, right? The Mecca shopper got it because they were listening to her. So that's another one. Actually, there's another Australian brand that I think has done, in this case, a brand called Frank Body. I don't know if you know about Frank Body. It actually sells here now. It's a clean, free-from beauty brand that's really in your face. I mean, clearly designed for younger, Gen Z-ish or older, bold shoppers. The packaging tells the story. The voice is very clear in the brand names. It was started by 4 or 5 friends. It's got a coffee scrub, which was the beginning of the brand. But the thing that I find interesting about it, aside from the voice, which is so, feels like, you know, you and me talking, is that they've created this, you know, wonderful gaming style loyalty program that goes with it. So, you know, you just sort of get a sense, a holistic sense of a brand that I know, that I recognize, sounds like me, plays like me, affordable, all of these things. And so on a smaller scale, because it sells, I think it sells here in Ulta, it sells in other countries around the world, as well as its own website, you get to see these sort of starter brands that came from a great idea and even more a great gap or voice, a missing voice in the market. And that I find, you know, just, I'm somewhat biased because it's Australian too, but I don't know the people. I just saw it and I was like, whoa, that's interesting. But my other favorite store, really my favorite store in the world, is Selfridges in London, which again is a department store. So I don't want everybody to go, oh God, the department stores, yeah. But what they have done very successfully in the health and beauty space. So this is luxury department store, you nodded, so you know it, with, you know, all designer brands and everything. But they have taken a very strong social purpose over the last 5 years, I would say, and actually sort of evolved out of the Dove campaign about, you know, everybody's beautiful. And so they partner in very interesting ways. And then they created a wonderful campaign called Hello Beautiful, in big neon lights on the outside of the store, right, for the 6 or 8 week flight. And that's continued to evolve. That was all about inclusiveness, diversity, gender diversity, ethnicity, all of that, and beauty inside out, even in this luxury department store. They evolved that into a whole concept called Let's Change the Way We Shop, which was all about sustainability. And in every category, in every department of the store, from beauty to food to fashion, the works. And most recently, which I think is really interesting, their latest campaign is all about wellness. It's all about self-care, super self, it's called. And in everything from the products in the store, across the store, it's all about feeling better about yourself, the whole conversations around mental health. And actually, if you go and look online at the campaign, they cross out wellness, you could have a look, and it says feel goodness. It's all about feel goodness, but it's this evolution of how you take a really important message and trend about health and wellness, and not just buying a fancy handbag, which we might all like, and use the retailer and the brands carried by the retailer as a platform for social good. And particularly around health and wellness and beauty and sustainability and community, they have done an extraordinary job. And I step back and say, well, what are we all doing about it here, right? On that sort of scale. And I don't think you have to be a luxury department store on Oxford Street in London or a 4-story flagship in Amsterdam or Sydney to do that. I think that's this huge opportunity about thinking about the value of brands and retailer as brands to tell a much more meaningful story around beauty and what is beauty today. So I'm very excited about all that. I just want to see some of our troops on our shores get on with it, you know?
Yeah, that's so good. I would love to see that. I personally loved that campaign. I remember when Dove did it. And so it's exciting to see retailers and brands really getting behind that in a way, because it makes you feel good on the inside. And to your point, many of us are already thinking about that, whether it is fertility and wellness, or whether it is, thinking about how we look at ourselves and having those positive self-images, and then picking up the products also that are helping us to feel good about ourselves. So that's really, really good. I am curious, as you kind of mentioned the brand, I'll ask kind of one more question here before, we wrap, or hopefully this will be the last one. We'll see. You talked a little bit about, brands and the things that they're doing to really talk to their consumer. You talked about the Australian brand that has a specific voice and how they speak to their consumer. And then you also talked a little bit about, understanding where that consumer is going. I'm curious because I feel like many of the brands that I see pop up now, they almost feel like for the moment brands in some cases. But some of the things that you're talking about, and many of the brands that are mainstays, Maybelline, L'Oreal, they are, powerhouse brands that have been around for a while. I'm curious, based on what you know of the shopper, what would you say early stage brands or folks that are just building now need or should be considering if they want to be talked about 50 years from now?
I think really clearly it is about engaging with your, in this case, consumer in very intimate ways. And by that, I really do mean filling either an unmet need in the product offer, and it's sometimes less than the product offer. It is, what is the solution I'm trying to fill? It could be a physical solution, it could be an emotional solution, it could be a gap in my experience that I'm looking to fill. And then how do you, and this is where, small brands are often so good at it because they're so much closer to the consumer and ultimately their shopper in those early stages. And that ability to understand that and then continue to evolve that relationship. I think about brands like Lisa Price's brand, Carol's Daughter in the day, right? And, Lisa had just, had not only a wonderful story to tell, right, about there she was in her sink or something, but if you walked into her store in Harlem, you felt like you were in her kitchen, right? You felt like the history was there, the story was there, the integrity was there, and she was addressing issues that, women had, right? And so I think, one, you've got to begin with a really, I hate this overused word, authentic relationship with your consumer, filling a need with a person. I even hate consumer these days. Filling a need with the person or the people, and then being able to continue to build that conversation. You can't begin and say, oh, great, I'm going to do this, and then my goal is to sell for $5 billion, trillion. I mean, of course you can, knock yourself out. But, if you really want to create some longevity in this and you really have a passion for it, it is about the continually staying and evolving that relationship and not ever taking advantage of it or assuming people would just show up. Often the transition from small brand to big company is a challenge because the uniqueness or the intimacy of that relationship is, frays a lot, which is a challenge. But if you really believe in this, how you can help a person and people with the products you sell, then I think there's just a huge opportunity. New lines, take this out, leave it in if you like, that I'm quite fascinated with is in the whole menopause area.
Womaness.
Yeah, and Womaness I'm a big fan of because I look at what Sally Miller and her partner created. Again, it was a personal need, right? So often that's what happens, a personal need, nobody's addressing it. They create a business around it. And the key with all of that is how do you stay engaged? How do you stay connected? As Mindy McKnight, listening to her talk at the Emerson Industry Day, which was the most fabulous event, of course, last week at the fabulous Emerson Industry Day, and she talking about the way she developed her products and the way she stays engaged with the people who love her brand and includes them in the conversation of development is hugely powerful. You cannot undervalue that, whether you're a really big brand or whether you're a little tiny startup brand. And especially today when everything is out for human consumption to be seen, it becomes more important. So the very long answer to that, edit away, is that that's where the real opportunity is. If you stay true to that, you can build longevity in these brands.
That's so good. And even when I think about, I worked with a lot of big brands when I was a buyer at Target. I worked with your Always, your, Tampax. And I remember talking with them and they were always laser focused on the consumer. And, it's interesting. I'm thinking the conversations that they probably had in 1950, when like a tampon was created, right, was probably a very different conversation than the conversations they're having now. But the point is that they're making sure that whatever the relevant need and that relevant conversation is, you have to continue to have it. And that's where you'll find innovation.
And I do think the point you made about continuing relevance. I look at brands now like Midol that are have a very different voice now and talking about period pain. Well, that's another category. Oh my heavens, look at that. There's Pink talking about mental health. You can walk into Urban Outfitters and buy period product. What's this product? Crustacean menstruation, which blows my mind. But it is, how do I make sure that whatever I am selling is relevant at the moment? And how do I not put my old world perceptions into that designation of how people want to think about whether it's their beauty or their healthcare or any of that, And I really remark on legacy brands and big companies who, really keep an eye on making sure they're relevant. And that's that's why I'm so excited about all the opportunity in beauty and wellness, because I think that's the big explosion that I don't think we've seen, half of it. And I think there's so much more to come.
Yeah, it's truly exciting. For someone like me who's like, I find all of this retail and how people shop and brands, I find it fascinating. And I'm excited to just continue to see where things go. So much opportunity.
Yep, I'm with you.
Yeah. I think there's some really good material here. So I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for joining and for lending us your thoughts and your ideas about the beauty shopper. I can't wait to go back and listen and to add in some more commentary. I think there's a lot that folks will have to gain from this, and I'm excited to share.
Well, it's a pleasure, Monique. It's always a joy to see you and your passion for beauty and all things retail and shopping. It just reflects mine, which is exciting. And, I think about so much of the opportunity you have now, in developing so many of these up and coming brands with the lens that you have and Emerson has. It's exciting. It shows you the sort of whole new world that's out there. So be beautiful, be well, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Likewise. You have a great rest of the day, Wendy. I think a big takeaway for me is that it never hurts to follow the shopper. I mean, it makes sense, right? This is the person who is spending the money. So if you follow them, hopefully you get things right. Thank you for tuning in and listening today. Feel free to share this episode with your friends and colleagues, and I hope to catch you on the next episode. Bye.